weeks, which are written in Shulchan Aruch, which every Yid can get a Shulchan Aruch easily. Certainly has it. If he doesn't have it, he can at least get it. And for sure, every Yid is a cheskes kashrus that has a. We assume that every Yid does exactly what it says in Shulchan Aruch and learns halachos and knows what to do. The Rebbe was focusing on those extra spiritual components of the 3 weeks, as we will touch upon some of those things, but we'll mainly focus on the halachas. We often use the expression when we talk about making special hachlotas, special good resolutions. We say, if chas v'shalom Mashiach will be delayed. When we talk about spiritual behavior, that we need to increase our behavior during the 3 weeks, because we are in Gullus, and if chas v'shalom Mashiach will be delayed, we'll be doing X, Y, Z. Even after Mashiach will come, well, we'll still have to we'll continue our Torah, Avodas Hashem, mitzvahs, achlotas tovos, and all of that. So, as mentioned, we need to know the actual halachas. Leidas hamasa sheyasim. We need to know what's supposed to be done so long Mashiach is not here. There's the halachas associated with Avelis and mourning, and the Gemara says those who mourn about Yerushalayim will merit and be privileged to see the simcha of the Beis Hamikdash. But there's also a focus, besides the focusing on that, there's a focus on learning Torah about those aspects of Torah that talk about redemption and the third Beis Hamikdash. If we want to nullify and negate Churban and negate Golus, destruction and exile, it's not so much about through meditating about how terrible the exile is, but more focusing on how great the Geula liberation is. We need to awaken within ourselves a desire and a yearning to Geula, and therefore we'll demand that we want to have Geula, and that's how we'll bring about the Geula. And then we'll see how the Golus, the exile, really was internally was really all good, will transform the darkness into light. Halacha tells us that since on Shivas B'Tammuz, the tzoros, the negative aspects of Churban, of destruction, already begun. That's when it was a siege. That's when they broke through the wall of Yerushalayim. Therefore, there's some level of mourning that starts already from the beginning of 3 weeks. And because the Beis Hamikdash was unfortunately not built yet, we need to think about the fact that if it wasn't built, it's as if it was destroyed. It's as if it was destroyed nowadays. And if we just think about it, that the effect that will have on us is enormous. Like the Rebbe once said, that we know that the Ragachover explains that the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash is not as if it's happened once. It's a constant thing. It's not as if it happened 2,000 years ago. We're reflecting about the past. Every minute the Beis Hamikdash is becoming redestroyed again. If we would only think about that, then even if a Yid has a heart made out of stone, when a person sees the actual Beis Hamikdash going up in flames, it affects him. He would make so much noise and such a shturim about that. We are right now focusing on that idea that we don't have the Beis Hamikdash and it's being destroyed in front of our eyes. Now that can make a person fall into yish. The person could get depressed. The person, how can I overcome all the difficulties, all the challenges? But we know in the depths of our heart that really the strong love of Hashem to Yidden is found in those 3 weeks too, specifically in the 3 weeks and the 9 days. And in fact, as an introduction to the 3 weeks, we have the Yom Tov of Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, where Hashem is telling us really this month is really a month associated with positivity and Yom Tov. We just don't see it. And if everything that we do, even when we talk about the laws of mourning, we have to do it with simcha. One time the Rebbe said, over here in America, we see anything that we want people to accomplish something, you always have to have a smile. Everything is with a smile. It's an American minig. We should adopt that minig. So let me go through a couple of the halachas after all of that introduction. One of the all the stuff outside of 3 weeks are primarily minig, and not all circles have that minig, but it's been accepted pretty much amongst most of Klal Yisrael. One of them, Hagam, accepted in Klal Yisrael, they don't take haircuts in the 3 weeks. Haircuts refers to hair of the head, refers to any hair of the body, refers to men, it refers to women, it refers to children. We don't give haircuts to children too. If there's an issue of tznius, that's a whole different story. A woman is allowed to take a haircut if it's for tznius reasons in order to be able to cover hair properly. For chatzitza reasons, if she has to go to the mikveh, even if she has to go to the mikveh after Tisha B'Av. But since there's a custom that we don't cut our hair 3 days before mikveh, and she wants to cut her hair before, that's perfectly fine. A woman is allowed to remove body hair because she doesn't want to look ugly in the front eyes of her husband. For shidduchim purposes, a girl could remove some body hair, and this is even in the 9 days. When we talk about not cutting hair, that includes eyebrows, that includes mustache. Unless the part of the mustache that affects the person's food, it goes into their mouth, that's something different. That's you're allowed to cut in the 3 weeks. A chuf, if someone has a lot of hair, long, unkempt hair, that's a problem. And that's a problem throughout the year. One is allowed to, and it's a mitzvah to cut their hair during the 3 weeks. It is chukas hagoyim. It's a goy should be able to have a very long hair. It could be a question of a chatzitza for tefillin. The tefillin is not considered being worn properly if he has a lot of hair, and they should cut it even during the 3 weeks. A child that turns 3 in the 3 weeks, we don't do his traditional upshurnish in the 3 weeks. We push it off till after Tisha B'Av, until the day after Tisha B'Av, after midday. This year that would be on a Monday. But all the other beautiful manhagim associated with turning 3, making sure he wears tzitzis and yarmulke and brachas and all of that, that should be done in the 3 weeks as well. If a woman wants to fix her sheitel, cut her sheitel short, that's not called haircut. That's cutting a garment. There's nothing to do with haircut. That's perfectly fine in 3 weeks. I will mention when I say that certain things are fine in 3 weeks, that's 3 weeks. That's not 9 days. We'll try to have a separate share about the 9 days. That's all associated in connection with the idea of haircuts. What about getting married? So we don't get married in the 3 weeks. Even imagine if someone wants to make a wedding without a meal. No, we don't do it in 3 weeks. Even if somebody didn't have kids yet, and the very first mitzvah in the Torah is the mitzvah of Pru, having multiplying, having children, and in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Pru, one has to have at least one son and one daughter. He didn't fulfill yet the mitzvah, so he's pushing off this mitzvah. No, not in the 3 weeks. The primary reason is because loim misaman and milsa, it's just not a good omen. It's not a good, it doesn't have a positive sign to it when we do a wedding in a time associated with mourning. But if a person got married before the 3 weeks and the Sheva Brachas is continuing in the 3 weeks, then that would be fine. That's no longer practical this year because we already passed a full week of the 3 weeks. But if a Sheva Brachas may be made in the 3 weeks, as long as there's no dancing and there's no music, as we'll talk in a moment about that. If you get engaged, there's no such thing a person can't get engaged. It's so important for a person to get engaged. We'll do that anytime, even on Tisha B'Av. Shemi kadmenu acher. Maybe someone's going to be ahead of you on the game. So chaperai and do it at any time. You're allowed to get engaged. You're allowed to even make a l'chaim in the 3 weeks. In the 9 days, we shouldn't make a proper meal. We should just serve some minim merkacha, some delicacy, some nash, some small food, finger food or whatever it is, but not make a proper full-fledged fancy meal with at a l'chaim. But the general idea of having a shidduch or even making a small l'chaim, that's perfectly fine in the 3 weeks and in the 9 days as well. Moving on. One of the minhagim associated, one thing that I missed out, I will mention, electrolysis or laser. A woman wants to remove hair of her face, that's fine in the 3 weeks. I'm going back a bit, I'm sorry I missed that out before. Next, shechiyanu. In Shulchan Aruch, it says that Rama writes, it's good to be careful not to say shechiyanu in the 3 weeks on a new fruit, on a new garment. What does that mean, not to say shechiyanu? That means don't eat such a fruit and don't wear such a garment. It is indeed our minig. We don't say shechiyanu in the 3 weeks, even on Shabbos, because some people have the custom that on Shabbos they do say shechiyanu. And here there's a bit of a distinction. In Sfira, it is our custom. That's not mentioned in Shulchan Aruch, but it is our custom that in Sfira we don't say shechiyanu. But that does not apply to Shabbos. However, when it comes to the 3 weeks, even on Shabbos, we don't say shechiyanu. And it has nothing to do with avelus, with mourning. We don't say shechiyanu because of mourning. No, it has nothing with mourning. And avil, something with mourning, is allowed to say shechiyanu. Because if it would be with mourning, then it wouldn't apply on Shabbos. Shabbos ain't etzeva. There's no sadness on Shabbos. There's no avelus on Shabbos. It has to do with the fact that it doesn't make sense to say shechiyanu, l'kimanu. We've so been fortunate to reach Zman Hazeh this time when it's not such a beautiful, exciting time. So we don't engage in shechiyanu. Even Shabbos, even Rosh Chodesh. The person has a fruit that they won't find after Tisha B'Av, and they have this fruit already in their house, and you can't keep it until after Tisha B'Av, it'll get ruined. For some reason, even keeping it in the fridge won't work. Then you're allowed to eat it in the 3 weeks, and of course you should make shechiyanu. But if you could keep it at least till Shabbos, at least to diminish the problem, to minimize the problem, wait until Shabbos if it'll stay fresh until Shabbos, and make a shechiyanu on Shabbos, because making shechiyanu on Shabbos is not that serious, because there are those that say that you could make shechiyanu on Shabbos. And in this case, where you have no choice, you're going to miss out the mitzvah of shechiyanu because the fruit is ready in your hand, and otherwise the fruit will get ruined if you wait till after 3 weeks. So at least do it on Shabbos. The same thing is if you'll have such a fruit after Tisha B'Av, this particular fruit will get ruined. Okay, at least you'll be able to catch up and make the bracha after Tisha B'Av. If a person by mistake ate a new fruit, he forgot us the 3 weeks, he forgot us a new fruit, he made a bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam b'orei pri ha'etz. Stuck. Now, realize it's a new fruit, it's a 3 weeks. Big machlekes, what do you do now? The halach is, no, in such a case, you should eat the fruit. So you have to make a shechion if you're going to be eating it, but taste a tiny bit. If a person ate it already and didn't make shechianu, then no, don't continue eating. Stop eating. And after the 3 weeks, you'll make shechianu on another fruit, and you'll have a mind in retroactively also on the fruit that you ate now in the 3 weeks. An exception to this rule is that a woman that's expecting and she has a new fruit, she has a halacha that she's allowed to eat a new fruit and she should not make shechianu. For some reason, we're concerned that she'll have a craving to this fruit, and if she'll have a craving, it's going to affect her, it's going to affect the fetus, and we let her eat the fruit, but we tell her, her case is a bit of a different case. Normally, if you eat the fruit, you make shechianu also. But a woman that's expecting, she's not eating it because of eating the pleasure. She's eating because she just has a craving and because of her condition. In such case, she eats it without a shechianu. Same with a sick person that needs to eat this particular fruit, which is a new fruit, so they'll eat the fruit in the 3 weeks also. As part of this minig of not making shechianu, they also developed a minig of not buying or wearing new clothing, chashuva clothing, important, dignified, important clothing in the 3 weeks. Even those that don't make shechianu normally are new clothing, so it's not they're not going to make shechianu anyhow. No, they don't. We don't buy new clothing. It's a simcha. There's a simcha associated with buying a new clothing, and we're not trying to look for opportunities of simcha which are problematic according to halacha. If there's a need that a person needs to get something new, whether it be for Shabbos, whether it's just not respectful, the hat that you're walking around with, then in such a case, we allow a person to get something in the 3 weeks, at least if it's before the 9 days, because the 9 days is much more serious getting new clothing. In the 3 weeks, it's only a minute. Best would be to get it on credit. In other words, don't pay the full amount of money if the storekeeper is okay with that. And the rest you'll pay after Tisha B'Av, so it won't be considered that you've actually bought a new garment. This is all about clothing. There's no meaning about not getting new dishes, utensils, kalim. It's only about begadim, new clothing. Unimportant clothing, to begin with, is not a problem. You let it buy and wear from Shavas B'Tamas until Rosh Chodesh. I'm not talking about from Rosh Chodesh onwards. Undergarments, socks, new shoes even. You're allowed to even buy a talis cotton because a talis cotton is considered a mitzvah. So again, the 3 weeks, not a big deal. Buying glasses, which is a necessary thing to have, is fine. If somebody had a mazel tov and he had a daughter in the 3 weeks, so when a person has a new boy, they make a bracha toiva metiv for the good news that they had a new boy. When a person has a girl, so upon, not on the news, but upon seeing the girl, you make a bracha shechianu. That's what Alter Rebbe paskins on the first time you see your daughter. So if it's in the 3 weeks, you don't push it up. That's the opportunity not to make shechianu. You'll make the bracha in the 3 weeks also. Someone who's having a pidin ben in the 3 weeks, part of the pidin ben process is to make a shechianu. So we'll do that in the 3 weeks also. Shaloyach mitzvah, not to lose on, not to miss the mitzvah. And this is only the bracha of shechianu. The bracha of ateva metiv to begin with was never a problem in the 3 weeks. If a person has a new boy, has a child, a boy, then the bracha of ateva metiv is not a problem to begin with. One of the other minhagim associated with the 3 weeks is the minig of, which is bordered in all paiskim, rikudin, mecholos, and klei zemer. One is not allowed to dance. Rikudim and mecholos are 2 different types of dancing, whether dancing in a circle, dancing one person opposite another person. From Shiva Sabbatama's armor, there's no dancing. There's no singing. There's no playing instruments, and no listening to instruments, including instruments that are on a recording. We're not hearing the instrument live. The Rebbe in the magazine called the Yiddish Haim. So there was just a small amount of halachas about the 3 weeks. So one of the halachas there that should have edited that section heavily is the idea that we don't listen to music in the 3 weeks. So someone whose business, his profession is to play instruments, and he's playing for a non-Jew who's allowed to listen to music, the non-Jew, and he needs this for his parnasa. So whatever he needs for his parnasa, and it's for a non-Jew, there's no problem for him to hear it. He's allowed to play instruments until Rosh Chodesh Av. From Rosh Chodesh until after Tisha B'Av, the Pri Megadim says, no, you shouldn't play, even if it's for your parnasa. On Shiva B'Tamas as well, you also shouldn't play instruments. Now, when it comes to listening to, what is the definition of an instrument? So we know there's a bunch of instruments out there. What if we said that a recording of an instrument is like an instrument? Why? Because when you're listening to the recording, that became now the instrument. The instrument doesn't have to be an original instrument. It can be an electronic instrument. It can be an audio instrument. So the recording is an instrument. So what if you're listening to a person singing to a singer without a music on a recording? Is a recording a tape, a audio, a video of a person singing? Is that called also a form of instrument? So some are very, very lenient when it comes to listening, since the original source is not an instrument, and we're listening now just to a person singing, it's not a problem. But there are those that say that's also called musical instruments. So there's definitely room to be lenient with listening to a singer with is no accompaniment of music. But today's day and age, they make professional tapes with it's people singing, but it sounds like an instrument. They call it a cappella. Now that's a very serious issue, because even listening to a person singing on a recording is a big machlokes, but that's okay. In many places, they had a meaning altogether. They didn't sing in the entire 3 weeks. Some people in the 9 days, they just wouldn't sing. But certainly to override the spirit of the law and have something that sounds mamish totally like music and no one can tell the difference, that doesn't make sense to do that in the 3 weeks. The person is listening to very slow nigunim, nothing which inspires dance. It's a very slow nigunim. The purpose is not the music. The purpose, you listen to a Baal Menagin who usually has an old croaky voice. You're not really interested in the pleasure of the music, just purely to learn a beautiful, inspirational gaguim dvekus nigun. There is sometimes a bit of background music, and the background music is really totally secondary. You hardly pay attention. Every so often there's another beat there. That's not really an issue. It's not a problem. When a person is driving, especially driving for a long time, especially when driving at night, you're allowed to listen to music. You should listen to music. It's obligatory for you to listen to music. That music is purely in order that you should stay awake and not chas v'shalom fall asleep on the wheel. The idea of not listening to music, I know for many people this is the most important halacha of the 3 weeks, so we'll talk about this a bit more. The idea of not listening to music applies to camps, it applies to schools, and applies to homes. Especially our purpose of our camps is in order to train children to have Yiras Shamayim. And part of the training of Yiras Shamayim is to train the children that there's a period of time that we're sad because of the Beis HaMikdash. If there's a camp where there's little kids, you need to calm them down. It's kids that are not yet the age of chinuch. The purpose of the music is just to put them to sleep or whatever it is. That's a whole different story. Then the purpose of the music plays a totally different purpose over there. If somebody hired a music teacher to teach his children music, now if they're learning music for Parnasa, the children are learning music because that's how they're going to earn a living. So then they could do that even the 3 weeks until the Chodesh Av. But if the learning is just a pleasure, not for Parnasi, you're not allowed to do that. Bichlal is a thing that even Bichlal from the Churban Beis HaMikdash is a general exeda, which a lot of people don't know or never heard of or negligent, that we're not supposed to be playing instruments from the time of the Churban. There's a lot of hatayim what people are lenient about that. It's certainly the purposes of Avodas Hashem, so that I've been encouraged putting out Chabad tapes and Nichayach tapes. But I'm just putting this in context of it. So when it comes once a year, twice a year, Sfira in the 3 weeks is a time to be careful and focus on the fact that it is, after all, a time of Avela, so we have to focus on. Dancing, music is forbidden even in a Sudas mitzvah, even if a bar mitzvah, even for Siyam Masechta, even a Sheva Brachas. That's not a dispensation of being able to hear music. It makes no difference if it's a Sudas mitzvah. There's no, and a lot of times we realize that the simcha itself is more than anything that it comes with it. The music does accomplish a lot, but sometimes it's a simcha itself. When it comes to 3 weeks, we focus on the simcha itself and not on the external aspects of simcha. One other thing associated with 3 weeks is the idea of being careful from an yanam of sakana, of danger, trips, etc. Poskim write that hayomim ha'elu alulim l'chol hezek chas v'shalom. These days have a potential of hezek, of causing injury or harm to a person chas v'shalom. There's a negative omen associated with these days, and therefore we have to be careful from anything which is a chashash, sakana, anything which is a concern of danger during these 3 weeks. One of the examples mentioned in Halachos, it's actually found already in the Gemara, that from Shabbat B'Tavis until Tishbav, one should be careful not to walk alone during certain hours of the day. From the end of the 4th hour of the day until the end of the 9th hour of the day, that's a time where there's certain demons going around. I don't know what kind of demons we're talking about. I've never seen them unless they're 2-legged demons, no idea. But we have to be, and particularly here during these 3 weeks, Ketev Meridi is the name, based on a Lashon Pasuk. So a person has to be careful not to walk alone, not to walk exactly between where the sun is and the shade is. when we talk about walking in such a place, we're talking about where there's no people around. If there's people around, then it's not really a problem. Bichlal trips during these days is not the proper time for trips. One should cut out, minimize somewhat at least taking walks and trips and things like that. The person needs this for health. If it's done as inspiring and encouraging people for learning Torah, it's done in a school, in a camp, that's part of what we're trying to inspire them for Yerushalayim, and we give them a prize, that's a whole different story. The Friedrich Rebbe writes in Sefer Lekutei Deburim, the Sichos of the Friedrich Rebbe, it says there that in Lubavitch, people used to take walks from Shavuos until Shabbos Nachmu, except with a small break in the 3 weeks. The 3 weeks, seine Gewen, be'emes Gewen Treuertag, they were indeed really sad days. In Lubavitch, they kept the Halachos of Tisha B'Av, meaning the 3-week Halachos, with all the Pratei Dinim, with all the actual details. So otherwise, other than those 3 weeks, between Mincha and Ma'ariv, people used to take walks, like spazieren, a bissel spaziert über den Marktplatz, in the place where the big market was. People would enjoy the walk and enjoy the Geschmack, the gute Zummerdige Luft, the good summer air. But the 3 weeks, that's when they wouldn't take these walks. So again, we're not talking about something which is Asra Pi Halacha, but Lubavitch was this understanding. It's not that the regular walk time taking didn't take place in the 3 weeks. You're allowed to go and swim in a pool. You're allowed to go in the ocean until there's Chodesh Shab. You have to be careful. Anything which is a chashash sakana, concern of danger, and therefore a lot of people try to avoid going in rivers and oceans and washing themselves there the time of the 3 weeks. A person has to travel for a lengthy trip. The Rebbe encouraged many, many times that they should try to make preparations before the 3 weeks begin for the trip, even packing a couple of shmatas, starting off just a form of preparation. So it'll be considered that the trip started before Shabbos B'Tammuz. Certainly, well, now the 3 weeks have already begun, but certainly if a person is traveling for kibbutz avayim, for a mitzvah, for anything like that, for shlichus, it's not a good idea to delay something like that. That shouldn't be pushed off. That should be done even in the 3 weeks. People that need medical treatment, medical procedures, if it's possible, if at all possible, it is appropriate that a complex medical procedure, we're not talking about plain simple things, but a complex medical procedure should be pushed off till after Tisha B'Av. Similar to what it says in Shulchan Aruch, not to hit students in the 3 weeks, not a good idea all year round, but it's 3 weeks, because if it's a time of sakana, it's not a good time to hit children or students. We'll get to that in a moment. So certainly one shouldn't be taking doing complex medical procedures. And as we have the famous rule, kola, kavala, toiva, anytime something is delayed, it's a good sign. So if we're going to be delaying the medical procedure until after the 9 days, that's gewaldig. At least if it can be pushed off till after Tisha B'Av, it should be done before Chodesh Av. If the doctor insists and says, no, it has to be done mamash, okay, so we should try to do it, at least if possible, before Shabbos Chazoin, which this year is the day before Tisha B'Av. Certainly, if we're talking about something which is pikuach nefesh, which is a matter of life and the opposite of life, and it has to be done right away, then we shouldn't push it off at all. What has to be done has to be done. Regular, normal, routine treatments which don't put a person into a state of danger, dental treatments, all those kind of things are not a problem at all to do in the 9 days, 3 weeks, etc. When we want to discipline our children, our students, I just mentioned that. First we say, Yitnu Musar b'nichusa. Try to rebuke them calmly, in a relaxed way. No, not using force, which is, like we said, not a good idea all year round, but certainly not in the 3 weeks. Moving on to the next topic, buying houses, moving apartments, renovating. Some have a chumrah not to buy a house in the 3 weeks because loy mesamna mulsa is just not a good omen. It's not something which is asra pi halacha. Mi'ikra, then if you talk according to the strict halacha, you're allowed to buy a house to live in the 3 weeks, but it's just not the best time because we're looking for a positive simul when we buy a house, so we wouldn't want to do that in the 3 weeks. Especially if somebody is in a situation where if they don't buy the house, they might not find a house. Someone else will get the house before them. Shemi kadmenu acher. For sure, they should buy the house now, and they could do it even in the 9 days. Certainly, if the registration, the house, the signing of the house is only registering your name only after Tisha B'Av, for sure, there's no problem to begin with. There is a meaning not to move into this. So that's what we're talking about, buying a house. Moving into a new house is a meaning not to move into a new house in the 3 weeks, even if we don't say Shechiyanu. So it's best to push it off till after the 3 weeks. After Chamishas B'Av, if possible, we should even be pushed up to El, which is Chodesh Rachmim. But again, this is not halacha. A person's allowed to expand and their property and do renovations, expand their property these in the 3 weeks, and make the dira bigger until Rosh Chodesh. Some people do have a main; they don't build in the 3 weeks because they look at it again as not a positive omen. So if somebody began building before the 3 weeks, you let it continue, and there's no halacha that you're not allowed to. It's a custom which is not brought in Shulchan Aruch. Some people have such a minig. Light renovations for sure is not a problem. Painting, it says that it's not appropriate for a person to paint their house throughout the 3 weeks. If, however, a person already made up, has a contract, is going to be painting their house. This guy is coming, paint, and he already made up a price, and he already started. Letting him finish is not a problem. Same with Chanukas Habayis. A person already has a house. House has already been, he already moved into the house. He already painted the house. But you want to make a celebration of Chanukas Habayis, not the right time to do a Chanukas Habayis. Looking for a good time, a good Geshmaka, Siman, a time not like Chodesh El, Chamishas B'Av, and not during the 3 weeks. There's a number of areas that they have instructions that they have publicized specifically for the 3 weeks, and I want to share them with you. And they have asked for this to be publicized at large. First of all, in the days of the 3 weeks, we should increase in mishpat and tzedakah. Siyam in mishpat tipadev shaveh b'tzedakah. Yerushalayim, Eretz Yisrael, Yidden will be redeemed with mishpat and tzedakah. We should increase in our mishpat. Mishpat means learning Torah, particularly learning Torah, the halachos of the 3 weeks, which we're doing that right now. And we should also increase in tzedakah and giving extra tzedakah. So during the 3 weeks, we feel this need to push. It's a turkit. It bothers the person. I got to do something. I got to do something extra, more than anyone will do. Extra Torah, extra tzedakah. In the 3 weeks itself, excuse me, every period in the 3 weeks, we move to the next period, which is a more severe period, we add even more. So there's a 3 weeks until Rosh Chodesh. We add even more in our Torah and tzedakah from Rosh Chodesh. We add even more in the week of Tisha B'Av, and even more in Erev Tisha B'Av, and even more in Tisha B'Av. But like I mentioned this year, the week of Tisha B'Av is Tisha B'Av itself. Comes to Erev Rosh Chodesh Menachem, which this year is going to be on a Friday, we should increase especially in Torah and Tefillah and tzedakah. The Rebbe asked we should give tzedakah the amount of money that it costs us to have 2 meals. 2 meals is the minimum that a normal person eats a day. Ma'atayba would be best if we increase and give tzedakah the amount for 3 meals, because over here people eat normally 3 meals a day. And we should make the decision about this before the 3 weeks begin. We should already decide that when it comes Erev Rosh Chodesh, we're going to give money for tzedakah, the amount of food the amount that it costs us to have 3 meals a day. If a person didn't manage to make this decision, this achlata, before the 3 weeks, it's already now in the 3 weeks. So make the achlata as soon as possible. The earlier, the better. Yofer rega achas kodim. And every moment earlier you do that, just the achlata itself, because we have a halach and shulchan aruch that even the achlata itself, by Hashem, is considered as if we already did it. So once we decided, we already have that extra mitzvah. And whoever didn't do it, any of these hayros, any of these instructions, if you didn't do it in the right time, so make it up afterwards. Another thing about the 3 weeks, we should put an extra effort in all the miftzayim. Miftzayim as in Miftzah Abbas Yisrael, Miftzah Chinuch, Miftzah Torah, Miftzah Bayis Mol Sfarim Yavda Chachameh, having a house full of Sfarim, Miftzah Tefillin, Miftzah Mezuzah, Miftzah Tzedakah, Mitzvah Neder Shabbos Kodesh Neshek, Mitzvah Kashrus Achil Shtir Kosher Food, and Mitzvah Taras Hamishpacha. Extra effort in all of these miftzayim. Another one of the instructions that often the Rebbe spoke about is that we should try to get rid of the reason of the cause which brought about Golus. Golus came about because of sinas chinam. People hated each other for no good reason. We should increase in Avas Yisrael, the opposite of sinas chinam, Achdus Yisrael, not only loving one another but feeling like one, in a way of Avas chinam, even if there's really absolutely no reason to love the person. So if we get rid of the cause, the effect, we no longer have the effect. If there's no longer sinas chinam, if there's avas chinam, then we have gola. As part of this avas Yisrael, we should make sure that we do Torah with a minyan, daven with a minyan, tzedakah with a minyan, all these things. The more we do, the betzibur is better. Our avas Yisrael today has a new focus. We used to say that avas Yisrael is to get rid of the cause of golus. Golus came about because of hatred, so we're going to get rid of the hatred and therefore have avas Yisrael. Now the cause of Gula is already gone. We had so much obvious Yisrael. Now we're standing on the threshold of Gula. The Rebbe spoke, I believe it was Shabbos Parshas Matis Masei, Tafshin Aleph. Now focus on the Avos Yisrael more as a taste of Gula. We're already entering into Gula, getting used to the idea of Gula. Start to have a taste of the way we'll feel in time of Gula. The time of Gula, there won't be any kin of the tachlis, no jealousy, no competition. We'll feel a tremendous achdus, and achdus beyond any division. There won't be felt noticeable any division between one yid and another. Avos Yisrael l'mayla mi'yischalkus. We're already having a taste, a haskalah of that. Now, that's what should be our focus on Avos Yisrael. And of course, when we talk about the 3 weeks, is the idea that during the 3 weeks we should learn about the Beis Hamikdash, which is something which is relevant for men, and it's also relevant to women and relevant to children. Yecheskel Hanavi, when he was told how the third Beis Hamikdash will look like, he said, "Why am I teaching people when they're going into Golus? Why am I teaching them all about their own Golus? Why am I teaching them what the third Beis Hamikdash will be like?" So Hashem said, "Because my children are in Golus, the building of my house will be put aside. Teach them about the Beis Hamikdash, let them learn about it. When they learn about it, it's as if they're actually building it. We want to bring about the building Beis Hamikdash, we should actually start learning about it. And now that we're in the threshold of Gula, also the learning is in a totally different way. It's not as if we're learning because we feel sad. We have such a strong feeling of Avelis. We want to fix up the chisar, the shortcoming, that which is missing because of the Churban Beis Hamikdash. So we learn to make up for that. No, we're learning because not only to get to fix up the problem, but now because we have such a strong desire, a koisev v'hishtoikikus, such a yearning to the advantage of the third Beis Hamikdash, even if there would still be the second Beis Hamikdash and there wouldn't be a Churban, we would say, yeah, but we want to have something even more than the second. We want to have the third. So now we're learning not because of the Churban, but because we want to have the Maila of the third Beis Hamikdash. And of course, nowadays when we learn Hilchos Beis Abchid, Halachos of Beis Hamikdash, it's also not in a way of Hilchos L'Mashiach, Halachos for the future, L'Mashiach will come. It's Halachos which are going to be relevant in the very next moment. So we learn in such a way that with a knowledge and understanding, the Vado is Gemura with absolute certainty that this is going to be relevant immediately. Farbrengens in the 3 weeks. The Rebbe once made a Farbrengen on Erev Rosh Chodesh Av, and he said that it's not so pasha make Farbrengens in the 3 weeks. I was worked very hard to find for myself a heter, an excuse, a dispensation why it's okay for me to farbring. And I found the best heter that I found that says that people that need to play music for their parnasa, I'll let her play music in the 3 weeks. No, my parnasa that says to farbring. So he found, since he really wanted to farbring before the 9 days come in, to give it that boost of simcha and tell us, to encourage us how we should add in our Torah and tzedakah to bring Mashiach. So therefore he found the heter. Generally, the Rebbe asked that we should find any opportunity we can make a farbring in a way that it's mutter. Find the heter. Do when it's connected with a simcha, with a bar mitzvah, with something else, turn into a farbrengen of simcha. I said I will focus a bit on the halachas of the 9 days, but there's one halacha of the 9 days which is relevant before the 9 days. In the 9 days, we don't wear freshly laundered clothing, except for undergarments, which the general custom is that people are lenient about that. There's not everybody agrees with that, but the general custom is that people are lenient with undergarments, socks, and things like that. If so, you don't put in any freshly laundered garments in the 9 days. If, however, you wore it once before the 9 days, then you're allowed to wear it in the 9 days, because the simcha that a person has is when they wear it only the first time. So therefore, the 9 days are coming up, and we're planning as if we're chas v'shalom going to be in Golus. So what's the age that people find themselves in a hot place? It's extremely hot, a lot of sweat. They need to change their shirts. Well, what do? And they can't put on freshly laundered clothing, so you wear the same shirt for 9 days. So the poskim say that before the 9 days, put on a bunch of garments before for a short while. So now it's considered non-fleshly laundered clothing. This applies not only to adults, it applies to children, women and children too. Once a child reaches the age that they know what it means to mourn in Yerushalayim, so unfortunately, a lot of adults don't know that either, but it is already the age of chinuch, not just chinuch to make the brachas, but it's an older age of chinuch, where a person could appreciate the idea of sadness and mourning. Then it should be taught the idea that we don't refresh laundered clothing, and they could prepare for these clothing before the 9 days, which is on Erev Chodesh of this year on a Friday. So one should prepare these clothing by putting them on. ideally, we shouldn't, a lot of places can say you shouldn't put on a bunch of clothing one on top of each other, because the idea is to feel like you actually wore. But you put 10 shirts one on top of each other, you don't really, it doesn't lose its newness, freshly laundered kind of feeling. If for some reason, if you did it that way and it just loses its freshness, then it's okay. How much time do you wear it? You wear it a significant amount of time that it no longer has that feeling of something new. Another way of defining that is if a normal person would mind if someone else puts it on for that amount of time. A person puts it on for a second, most people can't be those, I'll wear it now. But if a person was wearing it for a while, hard to give a number. It's less than an hour. It doesn't say in Poskim a number. I would say it's probably more like 20 minutes, half an hour, depending on the garment and depending on the person. If a person put on a garment right before the 9 days, and it became shkia, he only wore it for a second. He doesn't have to take it off. But if a person put on in the 9 days a newly, freshly laundered garment, you don't have to remove it. Once you put it on, you can keep it on. If a person didn't prepare before the 9 days their clothing, so some are lenient, it's not the ideal thing, but some are lenient if you're stuck to put it on the ground. The ground does not mean on the floor. Put it on the real ground, earthen floor, proper ground. Then it's considered if it's no longer freshly laundered, but that's the second choice. Ideally, once you put it on before the 9 days. Another eitzah that people give for someone that didn't manage to change their clothing before the 9 days is to give it to a Sfardi. Sfardim have the minig that they're allowed to wear almost all the halachas that we keep the entire 9 days. A lot of Sfardim minig is only the week of Tisha B'Av, which just say the week of Tisha B'Av is Tisha B'Av itself. So there's no such thing as 9 days for them this year because they don't have the week of Tisha B'Av, which is only Tisha B'Av itself. If you give it to a Sfardi that he should wear, okay, so it's now that a Sfardi wore, now the Ashkenazi, so in the 9 days, now for the Ashkenazi could go wear it also. Talking about the 9 days, the Gemara says, Mishanichnas of memata mesimcha, that when the month of Av comes in, we decrease in simcha. But the Mishanichnas of memata is limited. We don't decrease in everything. There's certainly inyanim of simcha that apply even in the month of Av. Simcha is something that has to be at all times. Even in the month of Av, we have the mitzvah of Ivdu Hashem besimcha, serving Hashem with happiness. Mematim, minimizing, that's certain things. It says certain things we're supposed to act in a non-simcha way. Because of this mitzvah of Ivdu Hashem besimcha, it doesn't apply across the board. Hashem is in a place of happiness. Wherever Hashem is, there's happiness. So if we want to make a dira b'tachtonim, a place for Hashem, then we need to have happiness, because otherwise it can't be a place for Hashem. Hashem is always in a place of happiness. And that's why, even at the time that it says Mamatim b'simcha, we decrease in simcha, we always still have to have simcha. A measure at simcha. Because since we always have to make a dwelling place for Hashem at every single moment, the entire goal of a person in this world is that kol adam liyis is to make a deal for the Yeshaya in this world. And a person's mission in life, we were only created to serve Hashem. So at every single moment, we have to be happy because that's how we'll make a dwelling place for Hashem. And even though we say that at sometimes we have to act the opposite of simcha, which is the avodah of, that's to remove the idea of because we were in exile. So that's not how we're making a deal to Hashem. Don't forget, we're not going to make a dwelling place for Hashem through the morning halachas. That's to prepare for the apartment. We're making a dwelling place for Hashem. The dwelling place for Hashem, to preparation stuff, we need to do other things too. But the actual dwelling place happens through simcha. And that's what Chassidim was so not so particular, though, not so mahadar. They didn't go out of their way in doing the mamatim b'simcha, because the mamatim b'simcha, minimizing happiness, is a secondary thing in our avodas Hashem, and that's why, like we said, it's limited. That we always have to have simcha. Number one, even in a time when matim b'simcha, when we decrease simcha we still have to have, and two, the idea of not having simcha is not the focus. That's not the ikr of our avodas Hashem. So there are those that are very, very machmer, and they get very, well, why are we demanding people to have simcha? For some reason, even before the month of Av starts, they're already saying, well, it's already almost the month of Av. We already had Shabbos and Varchim Av. So you still have time. It could be 24 hours, 36 hours to the month of Av. And even when it comes to the month of Av, it's also only Mamatim. What does Mamatim mean? When we can contrast it with the Simcha of Chodesh Adar. When we contrast it with the Simcha that will be when Mashiach comes, so compared to that, the month of Av has less Simcha. But Simcha, of course we have Simcha. There's a pshat, which is not the Pashto pshat, but that I've mentioned it several times, that the Chassidish pshat that I mentioned primarily in the name of the Mukatcher Rebbe, the matim besimcha, does, instead of interpreting the literal meaning, we minimize our simcha. The matim, we minimize and cut down on all the negative things. You know how you'll cut down all the negative things? Besimcha, through doing simcha. When we focus on doing simcha, that will cut on all the negative things. And it's actually mentioned in conjunction with marba mesimcha chodesh adar, meaning the not having simcha and av is the same idea of having extra simcha in chodesh adar. Because the purpose of minimizing our simcha in the month of Av is in order to transform the darkness into light, transform the bitterness into sweetness. So it's ultimately the same purpose of as Chodesh Adar when we increase in simcha. Now, obviously, we're not talking about simcha in a way that's not permissible. We're talking about a way that Shulchan Aruch allows us to have simcha. We can have simcha through Torah. Pikudei Hashem Yeshaya Mesamche Lev. Hashem's Torah gladdens our heart. Mitzvahs, Pikudei Hashem is Hashem's mitzvahs. Torah mitzvahs make us have simcha. Tzedakah makes us have simcha. Make simcha to the poor person, literal simcha. Siyumim, making siyumim during the 9 days, that's perfectly permissible. Making a siyum, berabim, betzibah, hearing a siyum every single place, every single day, we make a simcha down here, and that makes a simcha above. So that's just an introduction to understand the spirit of the 9 days. The week of Tisha B'Av is when the Gemara starts telling things that are asar al pi din, medina de Gemara, according to the basic halach, there's things that are forbidden in the week of Tisha B'Av. Some things are forbidden in the week of Tisha B'Av only because of the minig. And our meaning is a lot of the things that are problematic in the week of Tisha B'Av already start from the beginning of the month of Chodesh Av, which is why, like I said, you'll find people that don't know of special manhagim for the 9 days because they don't follow not Ashkenazim, and they keep only these manhagim or these halachos. In the Gemara, it only mentions the week of Tisha B'Av. And as mentioned a number of times tonight already, that during this year we don't have the week of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the week of Tisha B'Av. When I say the 9 days, what does the 9 days mean? The 9 days mean from sunset, the night of the Chodesh, until the minig is that we actually continue, start from sunset, the night of the Chodesh, and we continue the halachas, the manhagim of the 9 days, until the 10th of Av, until midday. One of the things that is mentioned, in this case, it actually says in the Gemara from the beginning of Av, not the week of Tisha B'Av, Mishanifnas Av, from the beginning of the month of Av, if a Yid has a court case, a legal issue with a guy, he should try to avoid this legal issue in the month of Av. He should try to wait until the Chodesh El. The month of Av, it's not a good time to be involved in a legal issue with a dispute with a guy, because it's not a good mazel, it's an unhealthy mazel. The month of Adar is body mazel, has a healthy mazel, and the month of Av, the Gemara says Reya mazel has a no good mazel. So keep away from interacting with a non-Jew, because he might win the court case. If you can't push it off to Rosh Chodesh El, at least push it off to after Tisha B'Av. One of the things in the month of Av we do different than other months is that Kiddush Levana we don't do before Tisha B'Av, because it's a time of avail, it's a time of mourning. Kiddush Levana is considered Kabbalah's Pnei Shechina, receiving the Shechina. We only receive the Shechina mitayv simcha in a state of happiness. So we don't do the Kiddush Levana. We leave the Kiddush Levana until Matzah Tisha. Matzah Tisha is an appropriate time to do Kiddush Levana. That's when Mashiach, it says that Mashiach was born on Tisha B'Av, and because it's called Menachem, Mashiach's name is Menachem, and he was born in the month of Menachem Av on the day of Tisha B'Av. And to recognize the idea of the birth of Mashiach, so wait without Kiddush Levana until then. There's another explanation because the Churban Beis Hamikdash is considered the Pgima de Sihara. It's considered the defect of the moon. The Beis Hamikdash Kval Yisrael Beis Hamikdash compared to the moon, and that's considered the defect. And only after the Churban is over, when it's after Tisha B'Av, do we have the idea of Kiddush Levana. I will mention a few halachas about the 9 days, but primarily that will be in the next year. Shulchan Aruch mentioned something that we don't. We're matan, we cut out on business. We don't see nowadays people should follow this halacha, because today most business that we do is considered parnasa. It's not just business for luxury, and because everything is considered today kedei parnasa seinu, see, we don't have this idea of cutting out on business in the 9 days. Otherwise, when we're talking about buying, one should avoid buying silver dishes, chashva, nice, expensive furniture, things like that. Spoons, plates, things they need for the house is not a problem. But clay, tashmish, chaviv, and precious, exciting things, including even a car or or a washing machine or a dryer, which you don't mamish need. If it's a car for parnasa, then it's not a problem, because if that has to do with the idea that we cut out on business, with nowadays the niggas that we don't cut out on business. But otherwise, you shouldn't buy these chashuv things except for regular stuff. Things that are not so urgent could wait until Tisha B'Av. You let it go to the store and find out the price, it's not a problem. So if a person bought new furniture, and by the way, and this idea is even if we don't say Shechianu on it, it's still part of the Mamatim B'Simcha. If you bought new furniture before the 9 days, and the furniture arrived in the 9 days, so try not to bring them to your house. At least try not to use it until after Chatzos of Yud Asiri B'Av of the 10th of Av. When it comes to clothing, so we mentioned about a minig in the 3 weeks, but that was purely a minig. When it comes to the 9 days, it's a much more serious issue of buying new clothing. In this case, even not important clothing is included in it. New shoes shouldn't be bought in the 9 days. Even if there's a sale, even if there's a loss, even if you're planning to leave it and not put it on until after Tisha B'Av, it shouldn't be bought in the 9 days. New tefillin is okay. New tefillin is done for a mitzvah. A talis and a talis cotton, even though it's done only for the mitzvah, but they are considered garments, and therefore you're not supposed to buy a talis. So I mentioned early in the shir that buying in the 3 weeks, it's okay to buy a new talis cotton, a new talis. But that's in the 3 weeks. It's not considered a chashuv, a garment. It's very chashuv, and in the context of the 3 weeks, it's not so serious. When it comes to the 9 days, it is a thing that we don't buy new garments. Tefillin is okay. Tefillin is not considered a garment in that context, but a talis and talis cotton should not be bought in the 9 days. Tisha B'Av shoes. If a person doesn't have any other Tisha B'Av shoes, they only have regular leather shoes, and they need to wear on Tisha B'Av sneakers for Avil. So they're allowed to buy them for the very first time in the 9 days on Tisha B'Av itself, because they don't have anything else. That's fine. I'm talking only about buying. We're not talking about sending gifts. Sending gifts, you're allowed to send a gift to someone in the 9 days. The problem of sending a gift is only on Tisha B'Av itself. There's a few details here about this halacha of buying stuff in the 9 days. First of all, you want to order furniture, that's fine. Ordering furniture and the delivery is only going to come after Tisha B'Av, that's not really considered a simcha. You didn't really do any purchasing. That's not really a problem. Secondly, glasses. I mentioned all kind of clothing. Glasses like an in-between thing. In the 3 weeks, you said it's okay to buy glasses, but in the 9 days, you should avoid buying glasses unless you really need glasses. So it depends. The glasses, there's different kind of glasses. There's glasses that you need, glasses that looks beautiful. Could you fix the glasses? Is there a new frame? Is it new lenses? So this is what the type of thing that we should really try to avoid doing in the 9 days. For kids, there's room to be lenient to buying little kids' clothing until they turn 6. At least if it's not in the week of Tisha B'Av. When we mention that if it's a special sale, then even so, you shouldn't be buying clothing in the 9 days. If there's an exceptional, unusual, crazy sale, and the sale finishes before the 9 days are over, and you would buy this garment even if there wouldn't be a sale, and it's a really unusual sale, and you're not going to be wearing the garment until after Tisha B'Av, then there's room to be lenient until the week of Tisha B'Av because of this absolute ridiculous sale. But again, don't wear the garment until after Tisha B'Av. Don't even wear it on Shabbos. Certainly, if you won't be able to find this garment ever again, of course you could be lenient. Best would be that you should pay for the garment before the Chodesh and don't use it until after Tisha B'Av. People that are getting married after Tisha B'Av, really, they should wait and not buy clothing until after Tisha B'Av. But sometimes if a person is going to wait until after Tisha B'Av, maybe it won't come a time for the chasnas. Again, that's a case where it could be lenient. A kid that turned 3, and you need to buy him a new pair of talis cotton, that's a whole different story. You buy him a yarmulke. Of course, ideally, you should get him to wear tzitzit already before the Chodesh, and you won't have any other problem. The same thing with someone whose talis ripped. He can't borrow a talis from someone else. There's no one to borrow a talis. Or he's extremely hypersensitive and he can't wear someone else's talis. That case is an exception to the rule. He's allowed to buy a brand new talis. Another halacha about the 9 days is the idea of binyan unatiyah shel simcha. The Gemara says, in the beginning of the month of Av, we minimize in binyan shel simcha, building something which is associated with happiness. What's considered a binyan associated with simcha? Binyan shel tzir v'kir, fancy stuff, drawings, paintings, engraving things. What we take that to mean practically, la halach l'mais. That's what it says in the Pesach. What does it mean? Any building that you don't really need for living, you're doing it only what we call la harvacha ba'alma, just for extra, for luxury. So a person has a house, he could live there. He just wants to make the sides bigger, wants to make it bigger, higher, taller. That's a problem. If a person has a small house and he wants to make it bigger, and now he started demolishing it. Now you can't live there, and he's stuck, and it was raining. Yeah, okay, that's a different story. Then he's allowed to build even after the Shchodesh. We usually wait after Zayin of, but a much more machna. A person who won't continue building the walls will get ruined. That's a different story. But here we're talking about the idea where a person doesn't really need to build. It's just for luxury. Painting is forbidden from the Shchodesh of. Wallpaper on the walls should not be done on who does that these days. For beauty, should not be done from the Shchodesh of. Hanging a picture is not called building. Some people have a meaning they don't even wash the floor in the 9 days. I'm not sure if it applies to a house which is full of children. Al pi halacha, it's not a problem. You can do it in the week of Tisha B'Av also. Certainly, if it's dirty, if it's Tzedek Shabbos, it's no problem. But polishing a floor, that's already a tainuk. That's already extra pleasure. There's really no need for it. That's similar to what it says, Siyur v'kiyur, fancy stuff. Fancy stuff we don't do in the 9 days. So polishing the floor shouldn't be done. The same washing a car. Unless the car is extremely dirty, washing a car is already considered a tainuk, an extra pleasure. And that should not be done in the 9 days. Buying a new carpet? No, we shouldn't buy or put down a new carpet in the 9 days. When we talk about not building in the 9 days, that means even through a guy. But if a person hired a guy before the Chodesh, and the guy is a contractor, and he's already on the job, so now the guy is working for himself. The difference between a contractor and a day worker is a contractor gets paid a set amount. You don't pay him per hour. When you pay him per hour, that means he's working for me. When you pay him for the job, now he's working for himself. So once you hire him before the Chodesh Av and he's a contractor, then he's allowed to continue working even on Tisha B'Av. The same thing if the guy is painting. But when it comes to painting, the place can say, Im yachal lefaise b'davar muad. If you can go and appease him, giving him something small, he'll give you a few dollars. Just wait until after Tisha B'Av. Tava lebracha, a person that will have a bracha. This is the talking about over here, which is something which is a noy for beauty. It's not building. So there's building extra something which is not necessary, which is a smaller problem. A painting, which is considered mamish a luxury, over there we say it's better to give the guy something to wait until after Tisha B'Av. If a person's parnas is in building, so he's allowed to build or paint even a guy's house these days. Shoes allowed to be built, shoes allowed to be painted. A mica fence, which is for sakana reasons, to protect from danger, is allowed to be done even on Tisha B'Av. If a person's wall is going to fall down, even if it's not a sakana, but he might lose money, and it might have simcha attached to it, still you're allowed to build it. You're not doing it for simcha, he's doing it just for a loss. Trees that are built for shade, for beauty, flowers, all those things should not be planted in the 9 days. If you're already planted and you want to water it, that's perfectly fine. You're allowed to buy flowers in the 9 days. L'kavod Shabbos, a person knows that every single Shabbos he wants to buy now flowers l'kavod Shabbos, that's perfectly fine. We spoke earlier about making a l'chaim in the 9 days. And we said getting engaged is perfectly fine in the 3 weeks and in the 9 days and making a l'chaim. But a suda was a problem. Getting engaged is something that at all times you should encourage people getting engaged. So if we all make a suda, even if it's on Shabbos, you do a small thing. Now, making a sudas mereim, a party where friends are getting together, is a problem in the 9 days. A lot of people don't know about this. It's a problem to make a sudas mereim, a get-together party for friends. A birthday party, which doesn't involve the suda, it's just a mesiba. It's an event. You know, there's some nash, some potato chips, not a suda. That's okay, especially if making for little kids, even friends getting together, but it's not a full proper suda. That's not a problem in the 9 days. It says in Poskim that if a miracle happened to a person, he should make sure the day that a miracle happened, every single year, he should get together with friends. Think of, first of all, himself, between him and Hashem, and thank the Eibishter, but get together with friends and make a suda, talk about the nest and show happiness. So what happens if this happened to someone, he had a nest happen to him in the past, and it happened in the 9 days? So the Hizbaidah is sitting alone and thanking Hashem, that should be done that day. The suda and the simcha, for sure, do the Shabbos Nachmu, do the Chamishas B'Av. Another thing, we spoke earlier about not making a special Chanukas Habayis in the 3 weeks, we said, because it's Loim Saman and Moses, it's not a good omen to do a Chanukas Habayis in the 3 weeks. But that was only a minig. When it comes to the 9 days, it's actually Asr al Pidin, even if you're not going to be serving meat and wine. This is part of the Mamata Mesimcha, making a special event for the consecration of a home, a Suda for the consecration of a home. That's a problem al Pi Halacha in the 9 days also. There's many other halachas that we have to talk about washing clothing, about freshly laundered clothing. There's halachas associated, we're going to talk about B'day Shabbos, there's halachas associated with eating meat, drinking wine, cutting nails, taking showers. B'li neder plan to do all these halachas in the follow-up shir. We'll talk about sewing clothing also. But at this stage, I do want to mention, because the shir is basically about to be finished, about the idea of siyumim in the 9 days. The Rebbe asked that we should publicize all over the meaning of making siyum in the 9 days, and since Chamish Asabav is a continuation to Tisha B'Av, we should continue until Chamish Asabav, including Chamish Asabav, including making siyum in Rambam. And by the way, this year, Rambam, the 3 chapters a day, include learning the halachas of the Beis HaBchira in the 9 days. The reason for a siyum is we should add in a simcha shel Torah and a permissible way to do simcha of Torah. When we do a simcha of Torah, we negate things that are the opposite of simcha. When we make a siyum in Torah, we make a siyum on the gullus. We make, not that we try to get rid of gullus. No, we want to finish gullus. Finish gullus means we take gullus and turn to gula by putting the aleph into gula, and it becomes gula. And these siyum, which should be done with many people there, beroivam, we should have men, women, obviously not together, with the mechitza, children. We get together, we hear the person siyum, and then a suda is made, and it's a beautiful thing. It's an of simcha. And we should try to connect every one of these siyumim with the idea of tzedakah. Shabbos, you give spiritual tzedakah. Say a nice word to someone. After Shabbos, a gashmis is a good tzedakah. So it's good by the siyum to have a tzedakah pushka. Before the siyum, in the middle of the siyum, people should put the money for tzedakah. And if you can make a siyum with a suda and with a fabrengen, this is not about eating meat and wine. We will talk with Shom and get to those halachas about the idea that it's okay to eat meat and wine on certain occasions. Could include a siyum too under certain conditions. But the idea of him making a siyum is just to increase in simcha. The Rebbe Yeshaya would make siyum in the 9 days, even though he didn't eat meat or drink wine. So, and if a person can't really hear a siyum directly by being in the place where the siyum is made, you can hear a siyum over the radio, you can hear a siyum over the phone, you can hear it through other technology methods, and that's also considered being part of the siyum. So it's important, I'm just mentioning this before we start the 9 days, just to encourage the idea of making those siyumim, hearing those siyumim, putting it as part of your program. The Eibush will help that all these 9 days should be Yahafchul, Sasnul, Simchel, Maidim, Torah should be transformed. The 9 days, the week of Tishbav, the 3 weeks should all be transformed. We should see the true Bein HaMetzarim, that the Meitzah, the narrowness, is really part of the Merchel of the broadness of Hashem, and HaMeitzah, Karasi, Ka, Anani Merchel Ka, and we'll be Zechet, Gula, Mitzvah, Shleim, taken from Yad Mamish, Nacht.